Arielle Grant didn't expect her Tuesday afternoon to be flipped upside down by a pair of hazel eyes and an argument over pudding. She had only come to Willow Creek Nursing Home to visit her favorite patient, Mrs. Delaney, the retired piano teacher with a sharp tongue and a soft spot for Mozart. It was technically volunteer work, sure, but for Arielle, it was the one part of the week when things made sense. Her job at the bookstore barely paid the bills, her apartment had a leaky ceiling, and her dating life was non-existent. But here, with the scent of lavender lotion and old newspapers, she felt grounded. What she didn't expect was to walk into the rec room and find Mrs. Delaney in a full-blown standoff with the staff over tapioca pudding. "I said I want the chocolate one," the old woman barked, arms crossed. "I brought it, Aunt Margaret," said a man, stepping into the room with a small plastic cup in hand. "You just threw it across the room." Arielle halted mid-step. The voice was deep, smooth, and laced with exasperation, and the man it belonged to. Tall, broad-shouldered, in a crisp navy button-down that did nothing to hide how expensive it probably was. His dark hair was perfectly tousled, like it had been styled by accident, and his face, God help her, looked like it had been carved with a chisel and a little bit of attitude. Mrs. Delaney's glare shifted to Arielle. "Finally, someone who doesn't lie about pudding," the man turned, catching Arielle's gaze. There was a pause. He blinked once, then tilted his head. "She with you?" he asked, curious but not unkind. "I'm not with anyone," Arielle said, walking over. "I visit Mrs. Delaney every week." "Volunteer?" he asked. She nodded. "You, family," he said, then smiled slightly. "Unfortunately." Mrs. Delaney rolled her eyes. "This is my nephew, Thatcher. He shows up once a month with pudding and opinions." Thatcher Raines looked at Arielle again, his eyes sharper this time. "You always visit on Tuesdays?" "Every Tuesday, yes." He studied her for another beat, then offered his hand. "Thatcher." "Arielle," she said, shaking it. His grip was warm. Firm, confident. "I've never seen you here before," she added. "I'm usually in and out," he said. "But today Aunt Margaret decided to launch a snack rebellion," Mrs. Delaney huffed, "because you brought that off-brand chocolate nonsense." "I raised you better. You raised me to appreciate overpriced desserts, not launch them across a room." Arielle laughed before she could stop herself. Thatcher glanced at her, something flickering in his eyes. Amusement, interest. He held up the pudding cup like a peace offering. "Truce, Mrs. Delaney snatched it from his hand. "Only if you stop acting like you know what I want." Thatcher shook his head and looked back at Arielle. "She's a menace." "She's perfect," Arielle said with a grin, and Thatcher looked at her like he wasn't used to people saying that. Like her answer surprised him. After that, he didn't leave, not right away. He sat beside his aunt while Arielle played cards with her. He asked questions about the home, about the staff, about Arielle, casual but curious. "You work around here?" he asked as she gathered the deck. "Bookstore downtown," she said. "I don't make much, but I get to read all day. You like that?" "I love it," he nodded slowly. "That's rare." "What is?" "Knowing what you love." The way he said it made her pause. There was something lonely in it when it was time for her to leave Mrs. Delaney waved her off with a grumble. Thatcher stood too. "I'll walk you out," he said. "You don't have to." "Humor me." They walked down the hallway, side by side. The air between them felt new, like static just before it snaps. "You're not what I expected," he said as they reached the doors. "Neither are you," Arielle replied. He looked down at her. "I'll be here next Tuesday." "Wasn't this a once-a-month thing? Maybe I'm changing my schedule." She smiled. "Well, if you're bringing pudding, make sure it's the fancy kind." He chuckled, then leaned in just a little. "Noted." She stepped outside into the crisp air, heart weirdly fluttering. She didn't know what just happened exactly, but she knew one thing for sure. She was going to look forward to next Tuesday. The next week, he was there early this time. Dressed in a black sweater and jeans that still somehow looked designer. He brought Mrs. Delaney 2 kinds of pudding, a bouquet of orange tulips, and a crossword book, just because. But it wasn't his aunt he watched all afternoon. It was Arielle. He watched her laugh. He watched her braid another resident's hair. He watched her read aloud from a mystery novel with voices and drama that made everyone in the room forget their age. And when she caught him staring, he didn't look away. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked him later as they sat outside on the bench near the rose garden. He shrugged. Maybe I like seeing you here, she blinked. You don't even know me. Not yet, he said simply. But I'd like to. Arielle looked at him, really looked at the way he sat like he belonged everywhere and nowhere, at the way his voice lowered when he spoke to her like it was something private. Okay, she said, heart pounding. Then ask me something, he grinned. What's your favorite kind of music? Jazz. Favorite meal? Pasta, any kind, biggest dream, she hesitated. To write a book someday, he nodded slowly. I could see that, then she glanced at him. What do you do? There it was. His mouth twitched like he was considering how much to say. Investments, he said eventually. Started my own firm a few years ago, she raised a brow. Is it doing well? He looked amused. It's comfortable? Comfortable turned out to mean that over the next 3 Tuesdays, he showed up in a different luxury car each time. He wore suits that looked like they were sewn directly onto him. One afternoon, he handed her a little box with a ribbon. What's this? She asked. Just something I saw, he said. Inside was a fountain pen, sleek, vintage, and way too expensive for someone who only mentioned writing once. She stared at it. Thatcher, I can't accept this. You can, he said, and you will. Consider it an investment in your book. And just like that, the man with the pudding and the expensive smile was becoming something she hadn't expected. Someone she couldn't stop thinking about. Someone who was starting to mean something. Maybe more than she was ready for. But the scariest part. She had a feeling he felt the same way. Arielle didn't know what to wear to a dinner that wasn't technically a date. Thatcher had asked her casually the week before, just as they were leaving the nursing home. There's a new place on Langdon Street, he'd said. They do a tasting menu that changes every night. Come with me. She'd hesitated. Like a date, he'd looked at her, level and unreadable. Like dinner. With me? Now, standing in front of her mirror in a navy jumpsuit she'd borrowed from her roommate, Arielle couldn't decide if this was a terrible idea or the best one she'd ever had. She arrived to find a driver waiting outside her apartment. You're here for me, she asked, eyeing the sleek black car. Miss Grant, the driver said with a nod. Mr. Raines asked me to bring you. She climbed in before she could overthink it. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly citrus. A soft jazz tune played from the speakers, not the kind you'd hear at a lounge, but the kind someone picked on purpose to make you feel relaxed. When she stepped into the restaurant, she didn't have to look far. Thatcher stood near the back, tall and composed in a charcoal jacket with no tie. His eyes found her instantly. Hey, she said, crossing the room. You look incredible, he said, without lowering his voice. Arielle felt her cheeks warm. Thanks. I borrowed it. I'm still impressed. The hostess led them to a table in a private alcove surrounded by floor-to-ceiling wine racks. The lighting was soft, the air scented with truffle and something floral she couldn't name. I've never been anywhere like this, she admitted as they sat. Then I'm glad I get to be your first. She reached for the water glass, needing something to do with her hands. So, you own an investment firm? I do, he said. Started it when I was 26. I had one client and a lot of debt. And now, he met her eyes. Now I don't need to worry about money. She nodded slowly. He wasn't bragging, just stating facts. So why keep working? She asked. His jaw shifted slightly. Because it's not about the money anymore. It's about building something that lasts. Something that matters. The server arrived with the first course in a amuse-bouche on a ceramic spoon she couldn't pronounce. Thatcher waited until she tasted it before taking his own bite. Good, he asked. I don't even know what it is, but yes, she said. The courses kept coming, each one more artistic than the last. Arielle found herself laughing more than she expected. Thatcher wasn't just sharp, he was quick, sometimes dry, sometimes surprisingly warm. He asked about her writing, about the bookstore, about her favorite authors. And when she talked, he listened like everything she said was something he needed to remember. Halfway through the main course, she leaned back. All right, your turn. For what? Tell me something no one else knows about you. He took a sip of his wine, thoughtful. I took ballet for 3 years when I was a kid, she blinked. Seriously, my mother insisted, said it would help with coordination. I was terrible at it. Now that, I would pay to see, he gave her a look. You're not supposed to laugh. I'm not supposed to lie either. His mouth curved and he looked down for a moment before glancing back at her. Your turn, she hesitated. I almost ran away once after college. I packed a bag, bought a bus ticket to Chicago, and got as far as the terminal before I panicked and came back. Why? I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I thought maybe somewhere else would make me feel different. And now, she met his gaze. Now I think I'm still figuring it out. But I don't feel like running anymore, he nodded, slow and sure. Good. After dessert, Thatcher didn't ask if she wanted a ride. He simply offered his arm and walked her out to the car. She expected him to drop her off and say goodnight. Instead, he got in beside her. I want to show you something, he said. The drive took them out of the city, up winding roads that climbed into the hills. Arielle watched the lights below grow smaller until they pulled through a wrought iron gate and up a long, curved driveway. The house wasn't just big, it was massive. Modern, angular, with glass walls that reflected the moonlight. But it wasn't cold, it was quiet, peaceful. Is this your place? She asked as the car stopped. One of them, he said. Come on. She followed him inside, where soft lighting glowed from recessed fixtures, and a fire crackled in the living room. The space was open but warm leather, wood, and steel blended in a way that felt lived in, not staged. He led her through the house to a wide balcony overlooking the valley. The city lights shimmered in the distance like stardust. I come here when I want to breathe, he said. Arielle stepped to the edge, gripping the railing. It's beautiful. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. I wanted you to see it. She turned to him. Why me? Because you don't ask for anything, he said. And you should. The words hung in the air between them. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't even know how to think. I don't know what this is, she said finally. You and me, I do, he said. She looked at him then, really looked, and there it was, something in his face that hadn't been there before, not a line or a smile, something unspoken but real. I'm not looking for complicated, she said quietly. I'm not offering complicated, he replied. Just honest. She held his gaze, and for a moment everything else fell away. I should go, she said. I'll take you. No, she said. I need to think, he nodded once. Then I'll wait. She left without looking back. But the second her apartment door closed behind her, she leaned against it, heart pounding, the weight of something new settling in her chest. He hadn't asked for anything, but he'd offered everything. Arielle didn't hear from Thatcher for 3 days. Not a call, not a carefully worded note delivered by a driver, not even one of those cryptic emails she imagined a man like him might send when he didn't want to seem too eager. And yet, she thought about him constantly, his voice, the way his eyes softened when he wasn't filtering what he felt, the quiet luxury of that balcony that overlooked the world like it belonged entirely to him. By Thursday, she was restless. She shelved books at the store with too much force, knocked over a display of poetry collections, and nearly snapped at a customer who asked if Hemingway wrote romance. On Friday, Mrs. Delaney didn't ask about pudding. She asked about Thatcher. I'm not his secretary, Arielle said, arranging a vase of tulips that had arrived anonymously that morning. You think he told me he wanted to bring you here every week because he needed a second opinion on pudding brands? Arielle turned. He said that, Mrs. Delaney's eyes twinkled with something too close to smug. You're the only reason he kept coming back, Arielle sighed. Then why hasn't he called? Because men like Thatcher don't know how to chase something real. They're used to being chased. I'm not chasing anyone. I didn't say you should. I said he doesn't know how to do it yet, but if he wants to be the man you deserve, he'll figure it out. Arielle didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her bag and walked out into the hallway, needing space. She paced past the activity room, the kitchen, the garden doors. She didn't notice the man waiting near the elevator until he stepped into her path. Was trying to find the right moment, Thatcher said. She stopped. You had 3 days, I know. Then why wait? He didn't look away. Because I didn't want to come back until I could be honest. With me, with myself. She crossed her arms. So what changed? I realized I've spent most of my life protecting things that don't matter: money, privacy, control. But last week, standing on that balcony with you, I felt something I haven't let myself feel in a long time. Arielle didn't move. What are you saying, Thatcher? He stepped closer. I want to see you, not here, not in passing. I want us to try, really try. She stared up at him, wary. What changed your mind? I didn't change it. I stopped ignoring it. Her throat tightened, but she held his gaze. If we do this, I need to know it's not just another luxury for you to collect. His jaw tightened. You think I see you like that? I think you're used to getting what you want without risking anything. He exhaled, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small key. I had this made the same night I showed you the house. I didn't know why at the time. But I do now. She looked at it. You're giving me a key to the library in the back of the house. It's filled with first editions I've never let anyone touch. I want you to write there. I want you to have space that's yours. Arielle's fingers curled around the strap of her bag. You're doing all this because you think I'll say yes. No, he said. I'm doing it because even if you say no, I need you to know you matter to me. I see you, Arielle. She didn't take the key. Instead, she said, I'll come by tomorrow. I want to see it again. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood in her kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at the pen he'd given her weeks ago and wondering how a man like Thatcher Raines had ended up in her life like a storm she hadn't seen coming. The next day, he met her at the gate. No driver, no staff. Just him, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and a worn book in the other. I wasn't sure if you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. He led her inside without a word. The house was quiet, sunlight sliding across the wood floors like liquid gold. When they reached the back, he opened a door she hadn't noticed before. Inside was a library. Not a room with some books, a real, floor-to-ceiling, oak-paneled sanctuary filled with shelves that stretched higher than she could reach. There was a fireplace, a leather chaise, a massive antique desk beneath a skylight. On the far wall stood a glass case filled with first editions Austen, Fitzgerald, Baldwin, Morrison. She turned slowly. You weren't kidding. I never do when it comes to books. She walked to the desk, running her hand along the wood. You want me to write here. I want you to feel like you're allowed to take up space. She turned. That's not about a room, Thatcher, I know. That's why I'm standing here asking you to stay. She studied him, and for the first time she saw past the polished exterior. There was something raw in him now unguarded. I'm scared, she said. So am I. She walked toward him, stopping only when they were inches apart. If I let this happen, if I fall for you, you won't be alone. He reached for her hand slowly, like he was asking for permission. She didn't pull away. I don't want to be a chapter, she whispered. You're the story. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed or practiced. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with something that made her knees weaken like possibility, like truth. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, everything else stilled. When they pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his. I still have questions, she said softly. Then don't go, he murmured. Ask them all. And she stayed. Arielle stood at the edge of the art gallery, a flute of something dry and golden in her hand, trying not to feel entirely out of place. The room buzzed with quiet conversation, the kind where words were exchanged like currency and names were dropped like anchors. Everyone here looked like they belonged tailored suits, designer gowns, polished ease. She debated not coming at all. But Thatcher had asked her himself days ago during a quiet moment in the library. There's a charity exhibit. I'd like you there, not as a guest. As someone who matters. So here she was, in a deep plum dress her roommate had insisted she borrow, her curls pinned up in a way that made her feel like someone else. Someone bold. She hadn't seen Thatcher yet, but she could feel the way people glanced at her, like they were trying to place her. She drifted toward a painting, a stark, abstract piece in shades of smoke and rust, and tried to focus on the brushstrokes instead of her heartbeat. You always stare at art like you're trying to solve it, Thatcher's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in a midnight blue suit, open collar, no tie. His hair was slightly messier than usual, like he'd run a hand through it in frustration or thought. You're late, she said. I was watching you walk in, he replied. You stopped the entire room. She shook her head. You're impossible, I'm being honest. They stood in silence for a beat, surrounded by murmurs and clinking glasses. I've never been to anything like this, she admitted. I know. That's why I wanted to bring you. This world, it's not real unless I share it with someone real. She glanced at him, uncertain. And you think I belong here? I don't care if anyone else does. I do. A waiter passed with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Thatcher took one, handed it to her. She bit into it and blinked in surprise. Okay, she said. That's incredible. Fig and goat cheese tartlet, he said, watching her more than the food. You memorized the menu. I helped plan it. She raised an eyebrow. You organized this event. I fund the foundation that runs it. Of course he did. A woman in a silk gown interrupted then, greeting Thatcher with a kiss on the cheek and a familiarity that made Arielle's stomach twist. He introduced her as a museum director, then turned back to Arielle like he hadn't noticed anything had shifted, but it had. As the night wore on, Arielle felt the weight of every glance, every polite smile that didn't quite reach the eyes of the other guests. She wasn't wearing anything with a label. She didn't know the right names to drop. She didn't speak in the measured, practiced cadence of this world. She drifted to the edge of the room again, needing space. Thatcher found her a few minutes later. You disappeared. I needed air, he studied her. You're not okay. I'm trying, she said, voice low. But I don't know how to be what they expect. You're not here for them. Then why am I here? He stepped closer. Because I'm in love with you, her breath caught. You walked into my life like a question I didn't know I needed to answer, he continued. You challenge me. You see things I don't. You make me want to be better. She stared at him, heart pounding so loudly she couldn't hear the music anymore. You don't have to fit into this world, he said. I don't want someone who fits. I want someone who makes me rethink it. I don't know if I can live like this, she whispered. With all of this, it's a lot. Then we'll build something that isn't a lot, something that's ours, she blinked. You'd give all this up. I'd give up anything that kept me from you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Not elegant, not planned, just creased and smudged and real. She unfolded it. Her own handwriting stared back at her. The first page of the story she'd started in his library. You printed it, she asked, stunned. I rate it, he said. Every word. I want more. I haven't finished it. Then stay, finish it. With me, tears blurred her vision, but she didn't look away. I'm not used to this, she said. People don't usually choose me. I do. He stepped back, just enough to kneel, not dramatic, not practiced. Just him on one knee in front of a room full of people who didn't matter. From his pocket, he pulled a ring. A simple band, a single deep sapphire surrounded by a halo of diamonds. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. I love you, he said, and I want to spend my life giving you reasons to believe that. She didn't speak, couldn't. She only nodded once, twice before her voice finally came back. Yes. The room fell away. The applause, the flashes of phone cameras, the clinking of glasses, it all blurred into a soft hum. Later that night, they stood on his balcony again, the city lights stretching out below them like a promise. She leaned into his side, barefoot now, the ring catching the moonlight. I never imagined any of this, she said. You didn't have to, he said. You imagined something better, and now we get to write it, she smiled. Chapter 1, he kissed her temple. And every chapter after. The morning air carried the scent of rain-soaked pine and blooming wisteria as Arielle stepped barefoot onto the flagstone patio behind the house. The mountain property, which she now thought of as home, had transformed over the last few months, not just physically, but emotionally. The once pristine spaces no longer felt like museum rooms. Books cluttered the library desk. A jar of pens sat on the windowsill, and her manuscript in progress lived in a folder on the antique writing table Thatcher had had restored for her. She found him at the edge of the garden path, sleeves pushed up, holding a metal watering can with one hand and shielding a tiny sapling with the other. You're up early, she said, walking toward him. He looked over his shoulder. This one's stubborn. Keeps leaning sideways. She crouched beside him, touching the damp earth around the roots. Maybe it needs more sun. Or maybe it needs someone who knows what she's doing, he said, placing the can down. Maybe it needs patience, she replied, glancing up at him. He smiled, not the polished, practiced one the world once saw, but the quiet, unguarded kind she'd come to know. You're better at that than I am. She tilted her head. I'm not sure that's true. You waited for me to figure out how to let someone in. He reached out and brushed a leaf off her shoulder. I didn't wait. I hoped. They stayed like that for a moment, surrounded by silence thick with understanding. Then she stood and held out a hand. Come on. I made breakfast. He followed her into the kitchen, where the table was already set peach slices in a glass bowl, eggs cooling on a ceramic plate, and 2 mugs of black coffee. The windows were open, letting in the sound of birds and far-off wind chimes. As they ate, Arielle reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. "What's that?" he asked. "My publisher sent the final cover proof." His eyes lit up as he leaned forward. "You weren't going to show me that first. I wanted to see your face." She slid it across the table. He opened it carefully, then held up the glossy image. Her name in bold serif font across a midnight blue background, stars scattered across the top like dust. "You wrote it," he said. "I did. And it's beautiful." She looked down at her plate, brushing a crumb away. "There's a dedication inside." He looked at her. "It says, 'For the man who saw the story in me before I believed it was there.'" His throat worked silently for a moment before he reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't think I've ever been more proud of anything." She gave a small laugh. "Not even the penthouse renovation, not even close." Later that afternoon, they drove into town. Thatcher had insisted she pick out something special for the launch event, something you feel powerful in, he'd said. Arielle had rolled her eyes, but she agreed, if only because he promised not to interfere with her choices. She stepped into the boutique, greeted by name now by the owner, whose eyes flicked between her and Thatcher with something like appreciation. They moved through the racks together, her fingers brushing fabrics she never would have dared touch before. Eventually, she settled on a floor-length emerald green gown with a sharp neckline and a low back. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Thatcher simply stood still. "Well," she asked, suddenly unsure. "I don't have words for what I'm looking at," he said. She crossed her arms, fighting a smile. "Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." She wore the gown 2 weeks later, standing beneath a canopy of soft lights at the rooftop garden of her publisher's headquarters. The launch party buzzed with laughter and champagne, but Arielle felt grounded, tethered by Thatcher's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. She gave her speech without stumbling, and when she finished, the applause didn't feel like noise. It felt like confirmation. After the crowd began to thin, Thatcher led her to the far side of the rooftop where a string quartet played something gentle. He stopped beside a marble planter overflowing with white roses and turned to her. "There's something I haven't told you yet," he said. She leaned in. "That's dangerous." "You've already proposed once." "This isn't a proposal," she raised an eyebrow. "It's a decision," he said. "I've been offered another acquisition, a firm in London. It would mean doubling the size of the company." She took a breath. "You're taking it?" "No," he said. "Not unless you want to." "I'm done making decisions that don't include you." She was quiet for a moment. "What would you do instead?" "I've been thinking about starting something new, a foundation for underfunded writers, scholarships, grants, mentorships. You'd co-run it with me." Her mouth parted slightly. "You want to build a future with me like that?" "I only want a future with you." She didn't hesitate. "Then let's do it." They danced to the last song of the night under a sky painted with stars, her head resting against his shoulder as he held her close. A year later, they were married in the garden behind the mountain house, surrounded by friends, laughter, and the subtle scent of orange blossoms. Mrs. Delaney, draped in silk and sass, officiated with irreverent charm and genuine warmth. "You may now kiss the woman who somehow didn't run screaming from your nonsense," she declared. And he did. Their first dance wasn't choreographed, and neither of them cared. They moved together like two people who had found rhythm in each other's chaos. Afterward, Arielle pulled him away from the crowd and into the library, where a copy of her second book sat on the desk. A dedication page already marked, "To the man who gave me space," and then filled it with love. He picked her up without warning, spinning her once before setting her gently on the desk. "This is still my favorite room," he said. "Mine too." She tangled her fingers with his. "You know, I never believed in fairy tales." "Same," she leaned in. "But this feels better, this feels real." He touched his forehead to hers. "It is." And it was.